Welcome to Change O'Clock. You better recognize it's your girl Alhan Islam, and today we're still going to talk about flooding. Last week we had Mr. Peterside.
What am I trying to say?
Mr. Peterside is the founder of Stanbic IBTC Bank and ANAP Foundation and the convener of Go Nigeria. And he shared some measures he feels like the government should put in place in order to curb flooding, especially next year. We're already getting to the end of the raining season. But of course, flooding is a vice that keeps affecting us every year. So how can we stop that? Mr. Peterside, he shared his 2 cents in the last episode on Change O'Clock. But also, we have a state, Kaduna State actually, that have implemented the recipe that Mr. Peterside was actually advising the government to implement in order to curb flooding. And we had the opportunity of speaking with Hafiz Bayero, who is the administrator of Kaduna Capital Territory Authority. And here, Mr. Hafiz, he spoke to us in-depthly about how Kaduna State managed the affairs and how they were affected by little or no flooding.
All the French, Germany, Greek, and all these things that you speak.
Thank you, Hafiz, for joining us on Change O'Clock. And we'd love to hear from you regarding how Kaduna State has been able to curb flooding.
Well, there are a few things that have been said that are true, and there are a few things that have been said that are not true about this flooding thing in Kaduna. The issues regarding repairing of dams, we did not have to repair any dams. But what did we do? In last year, 2021, Kaduna had a serious case of flooding similar to what happened in 2015. And we were discussing it at the Infrastructure Council because, of course, the impact had gone beyond just damaging lives and property, but had moved on to cause cholera because, of course, the water coming from the river was able to now enter groundwater sources, particularly wells. And, of course, people around that area began to develop cholera. It spread like wildfire, and discussion kept going on in Infrastructure Council. So at that time, I was the managing director of Kaduna Markets, but I made a point in my mind that next year I would be part of a team. I would ensure that we put together a strong team that will be able to battle this flooding. Actually, about 3 weeks later, I was appointed the administrator of the Kaduna Capital Territory Authority, which I didn't know was going to happen at that time. And part of our mandate was managing waterways in the city. So I was quite happy, but then, of course, it felt very challenging because I had made up my mind to ensure that we do not have this flooding this year. We commenced work very early. We partnered with a company called McFlock Nigeria Limited. Supposed to be the company that the firm that designed the Kaduna Master Plan in 1967, then commissioned by General Hassan Usman Katsina as the governor of the northern region. In 2010, Architect Nama Disambo also went back to them to say, look, you need to update this master plan, which was done. So I felt that they had significant value to bring on board. Of course, I also studied the master plan the moment I got appointed and started looking at drainage plans, waterways plans, etc. within the city. Now, in Nigeria, for the most cities in Nigeria, we do not have closed drainages or underground drainages like we have in Abuja, because Abuja was built relatively recently. So most of the drainages we have are drains that are on the side of the road. So the first thing we did was to, take a study and take a deep dive into why we're having these issues surrounding flooding. And then we realized that beyond just the drainages, a lot of people had also built up around the floodplain areas, because there is like a setback from the flood, from the riverbank of about 100, 150 meters that you are not supposed to build because it's a floodplain. But people had done that. We also realized that almost all the drains around those flood-prone areas that we had identified, like Kigo Road, like Ramat Road in Gwerimi, High in Amani, parts of Rigasa at the back end, Malali, Ngwendusa, etc. Had those drains had not been cleared or desilted for a long period. Of course, when it rains, rain brings everything with it. It brings debris, brings the silt, which is sand, and it builds up. And then the further you go into the rainy season, when the river gets filled up and begins to empty its contents onto the streets, etc., because there isn't enough room for the water to flow in the drainage because of all this debris inside, it builds up and then covers the streets and goes into people's houses. So the first thing we did was to desilt all the drainages around that area, and also begin to look at what we could do to build more drainages in those areas where there were none. That was the first thing that we did. Secondly, we now looked at the river to say, okay, how do we ensure that the river does not overflow its banks, which meant that we had to dredge the river. A lot of people talk about dredging, but dredging really is just about deepening the riverbed and widening the river, such that there is more room, more volume for water to actually sit in. Also, you would find that a lot of our people find it convenient to drop waste inside the river because they believe water will carry it away. But the same way you drop waste in the river close to you is the same way somebody upland will drop his own waste and it will end up at your own doorstep. So we began dredging the river, that is removing all the debris, including sand. You will find out that if you go past Kaduna River right now, you will see huge beds of sand that have built up because water has brought them from other parts of Nigeria. So we had to remove all that sand. This is basically what the dredging is, and remove all the debris inside the water, because we wanted to deepen the riverbed by about 3 meters. That was the plan initially. But we found out that it wasn't possible because River Kaduna, particularly the parts of it where the Kaduna city has a lot of rocks inside. So it was almost impossible to achieve that 3 meters depth that we wanted, that we set out to do. So we reduced it to about 2 meters. And then we increased the width by about 100 meters on each side, particularly in those areas that I've mentioned where people live. Everyone that knows Kigo Road knows that Kigo Road ends by the river, and you have buildings right there. So we did that. Unfortunately, we had to remove a lot of farmlands because a lot of people farm on the river, by the river bank, because there's easy access to water. They can easily use their pumping machines to bring water to their plants. So we had to remove quite a number of those sort of farmlands because they were not government approved. We widened the river, like I said, 100 meters on either side, and we increased the depth of the river to about 2 meters in some areas, and 1.5 meters in areas that we couldn't get the 2 meters that we wanted. And then we removed any other form of solid waste that was in the river. So this created more volume for water to actually occupy and not spill over. And like I said initially, we had also removed all the debris in all the drainages that are around the river to ensure that even when it gets to, when it overflows its banks, it goes back and there isn't any blockage for it to rise up and meet people further up the streets. So it took us about 2-3 months to do this. We also looked at 25 tributaries of the river. Tributaries are like, what will I say? They are offshoots of the river, like usually on the sides where they actually extend to like communities. So we went to those tributaries that were also in areas where people live and dredged that part, removed all the debris, creating more room for water to actually sit in. We cleared about 25 tributaries along the river on about 22-kilometer stretch of length, starting from High in Amani all the way through Kaduna South back to Chukun, and then we came to Kigo Road and moved up towards Ngwerimi, the back end of Ngwerimi, Millennium City, and all the way to Ngwendusa and Rafinguza. So this took us about 3 months to do, and we were very successful in the end. I must say, I must commend the Max Lock team and my own team that were working day and night with them, because I was only able to visit 3 times, but I had a team from my office that were visiting every day and working with our consultants and our contractors, the people we contracted this work out to, all teamwork. They did a fantastic job. So we did have some level of flooding, actually. But when I say flooding, I mean that yes, in parts of Kaduna along the river, the water still went beyond the banks. It still happened in Kivu, but it did not go beyond the first house. Wow. And then yes, it actually did not go beyond the first house, which was very good, because it wasn't more than 100 meters away from the river. But normally it goes almost a kilometer away. So we're able to stop that by now 100 meters, which meant that we had saved over 1,000 houses and so many people that I cannot enumerate right now. The same thing happened around Almanar Mosque. If you know Pola Road, for those who are in Kaduna, around that area, but it also did not go beyond the first house. Normally what happens is it goes up street and goes into a lot of houses. Then in and around Ngwendusa by the new link road, we had a considerable amount of water flow on the streets. But that problem was exacerbated by the fact that the road that was constructed was not constructed properly. So when the water came, the drains were not properly constructed to take away the water. So the water sort of like sat in the drains and also entered a few houses. In total, about 28 houses were affected across the state, with about 48 people that we had to move out. At this point, I must also commend the State Emergency Management Agency, who were working hand in hand with us to prepare for any eventualities. They had begun work on an emergency contingency plan with us to ensure that even if we had the floods, that we were able to accommodate those who were affected upland by providing schools and turning them into makeshift shelters. You know, this was during the school summer holiday, so we were able to use some of the schools as shelters. We were able to provide food items and cook for some of the people we had to move out. All in all, it was a success, because even the first row of houses that I mentioned were affected in 2 or 3 locations. It didn't really trouble them. We didn't lose any lives, and we did not lose any property. And about, like I said, 28 people were evacuated on 2 occasions, because we evacuated the first batch on the day that we noticed the water level had risen on the dry land. And by 48 hours later, they were able to go back to their houses. Then again, 3 weeks after, we noticed that the water level was rising, and we encouraged them to also leave, which they did. They could have stayed because it wasn't troubling them per se, but this is an emergency situation. We do not wait until it comes to your doorstep. So once we see that there's a rise in water level, we move them. So this happened twice. And all in all, we're very happy that we're able to save lives and property. But this is our job as government officials. That is the most important job for our boss, Mallam Nasir, to save lives and property and to secure them. And he supported us greatly in ensuring that we had the money. We spent about 46 million naira only. A lot of people have been asking how much it cost. And honestly, for me, I thought it was done at a giveaway price. I had in 2021 and 2015, the cost of relocating the people, rebuilding their houses, and you cannot even replace lives for those who would be lost, the lives that would be lost. So I actually think we got a good deal, but we are not resting on our oars. We are already talking to IMASA, Nigerian Maritime Safety Agency, and Nigerian Inland Water Works Agency, NIWA, to work with us to bring a bigger dredger. We used what is called a swamp buggy, and used a couple of swamp buggies to do this, but we need a bigger dredger. Once we are able to do this consistently for 3 years in a row, I believe that we'll be able to put this flooding issue in Kaduna to rest. And beyond that, if you look at most of the cities around the world that are successful, you look at London, you look at Paris, they have major rivers going through their cities, just like we have in Kaduna. You have the River Thames in London, you have the Seine River in Paris, and you can see what they have turned the river into. They have built a waterfront economy where they have like cafes, walkways where people can actually sit. When you build embankments, and then you have people, instead of it being a source of disaster, like we do, we turn it into an opportunity and create wealth and create jobs for our people. So this is the future. We have commenced the plans to look at that stretch where this flooding happens, and we're looking at building embankments on the river and creating a waterfront economy where it can be a source of an area for tourism and relaxation, as opposed to an area where we constantly have to battle flooding and loss of lives and property. Like I said, there is still a lot to do in Nigeria. It is not yet there's still a lot of work to do. But what he has done is to show that in Nigeria, it is actually possible to get into office and get things done. This is why we're very happy and we feel privileged to work for him and the state. And one more thing that I'd like to mention again before I go is that we will also consider building dams, further upland to trap some of the water also, at least to manage the flow of water. And I think all states in Nigeria, we sympathize with all the states that have lost a lot of people and property, and we pray that this never happens again. But I think everyone needs to look at all these measures that we have put in place, particularly in areas along the rivers Niger and Benue. It's very important.
Yeah, I think your idea is incredible. Also, I spoke to Mr. Peter Side. He's been very vocal about flooding on Twitter, and he also suggested that dredging should be done, and government and the people should not just wait till this happens before you even talk about it. And even the waste that you talked about, because yes, I feel even we citizens, we have to hold ourselves accountable, because when you're putting waste and everything, the water is still going to find its way, and then you're just creating disaster as well for yourself. I feel like, personally, beyond complaining, we also need to look at what can we do to help out, and not just even the government, and
we must have a concerted effort, both private and public sector, and of course the citizens, who, if things go well, they are the ones that enjoy. If things go badly, of course they are the ones that suffer. They must see themselves as having the biggest role in this, to ensure that they take care of their surroundings and ensure that they do not block drainages, etc.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for watching Change O'Clock. We are now on YouTube, and you should subscribe in order to watch our full video, as we will be putting it up on YouTube. So subscribe to our channel, and do not forget, this is how to get to the petition on flooding and sign, because your signature is very powerful.
Go to Change.org NG on Instagram. Click on the Linktree link on our bio. The first petition is the flooding petition. Click on that. It will take you to the petition. Click on Sign the petition. It's going to ask you for your full name and your email. Put that in, and it takes you straight to signing the petition. So click on the button and sign. It's going to ask you to chip in something to push the petition forward, or ask you to share instead. Pick whatever option works for you.
Lend your voice to the people in need of change. Change O'Clock, brought to you by the world's largest platform for change, change.org.